Hi friends, Eric again here with another probably lengthy video log, a video log, a vlog about the things that I'm doing because I feel the need to talk about them, or as this thing here says, I will explode, quite literally. So that I'm doing a lot of stuff and feel I really feel like there's stuff that I just need to put out somewhere in some shape or form, or else it's one of these things when you work mostly on your own and are not really rooted in any kind of community in any shape or form, that you have ideas and you have thoughts, and they just sit there in your brain all the time. And it sometimes, especially when you're in a bit of an ideation phase, as I'm right now, it needs to be put somewhere. And if the somewhere is the internet, without any guarantee that anyone actually watches this, and watches it till the end at least, who knows. Anyway, rambling, that's something I do. No, so let's talk a little bit about stuff that happened this week. So for Virtua 7, again, still in the game's done mode. I don't really know what I'm supposed to do with it now mode. I did add a beta version to the Steam, the Steam build. I enabled a beta branch or beta branch. I don't know, words. I enabled a test branch for Virtua 7 that has Steam Cloud support enabled, and that is, as far as I can tell, working. But I'm still a bit hesitant to switch it live for everyone, because right now, basically the moment you launch the game, whatever your save file is will be used as basically the template for the Steam Cloud, and I'm a bit scared of this ruining people's save files that have played the game on multiple devices. And for example, say you have a Steam Deck and a normal PC, and you played the game on both, and you're much further along on the Steam Deck version than you are on your normal PC. But once I do if I were to set this version live, and you would then launch your game from your PC with the older save file, the game would then use this thing as a template. And if you were to launch it then on the Steam Deck, it would overwrite that save file, which I feel is a bit of a rude move. But also, right now I'm not sure how I can, without it being incredibly fiddly, how I could avoid that. So I'm a bit scared of pressing the button. But at least it's working. So in a sense, it's probably the smartest to if I cannot find a way to figure out a system that checks, okay, how far along is this thing, and is the local save file further along. I would probably just set it live fairly soon, because the longer I wait, more people will own the game, and the more likely it is that it will then cause problems. So either I probably won't wait that long anymore. But anyway, if you're interested in testing this, you can set it live on Steam. I posted a thread in the Steam forums to describe, okay, this is what you need to do to get it, and here's some safety measures you could do, just in case you don't want to risk completely losing your save file, in case something goes wrong. So far, from what I can tell, nothing goes wrong, aside again from this slight weird risk thing. But it does upload your save file to the cloud, and you can then do fun stuff like delete your save file, and it will then download the save file from the cloud, or like use that as like the way to like set up the game and then kind of recreate the save file from the Steam cloud locally. So for example, if you would then play it offline, it would then play from the local save file again. But anyway, that's something that's been going on. I'm kind of like, yeah, like spending my Mondays fiddling around with that. And yeah, the goal is kind of like to have this done before the Steam Summer Sale starts, which is in like a few weeks, I think. So I hope to have it all ready and done until then. But we'll see how this goes. The next thing, or like in general, as always, please write a review on Steam if you played the game and enjoyed your time, especially if you bought the game and enjoyed your time, because, you know, SEO, it's a fun thing that nobody likes and everyone has to do. And also in general, again, aside from like SEO, I think it's like, especially with games that have a lower like count of reviews, having some kind of like collection of like, I hate the word, but like testimonials of people that played the game that could help people who might be interested in like making a decision is in general like a good idea. But again, I can like rant about this stuff like every week, but I don't want to do this. So like instead, let's talk about like the thing that I actually like I'm interested at like right now, and that I spend most of my time like most of my time like in a way honestly I've well, yeah, but also like I spent some time, you know, napping, which is also cool. So a JRPG game. There's like most of the basic battle system stuff I talked about it last week. How I basically built a move spreadsheet that then where then like enemies and player characters can basically pull their attacks and all that stuff from it. That stuff works. And like enemies now also act and according to like the basically the same rule set as the players do, and I have all of that kind of working and set up. So the next things on my list were stuff like, okay, now I have to think about items and inventory system and player character death, status effects, and in general, like how to expand what happens in a battle into like what then is like a series of consecutive battles, and like what this is supposed to feel like, and what kind of like experience I want to create with this. Because obviously, one battle is just like one moment of high tension, and the interesting part then in a larger system is like the sequence of moments of high tension that create like drama and create like a larger and like more longer term decision making process in a way, and like in some way or another, this all boils down to the question, like let me going down right down to the end of it all, to the question of like, what do I want exploration to feel like, and that's an important thing. So something in my project back in December, one thing that was kind of like driving me forward, and it's sort of like a thing that comes up in my ideas for games every now and then, is like, okay, how can I make something where like dying isn't just like a hard stop and reset point, right? This is something like, if you look at my blog, I talked a little bit about like a very like basically the earliest version of like what would end up becoming Virtua 7 was also a game where I wanted like there to be no direct failure state, like where you had no real HP, and like things happened in a slightly different way, and this like idea for like a JRPG system, or like a larger like RPG system that I started working on in December, which this stuff that I'm currently working on is sort of like an evolution or like spin-off of that. Also like played around with the idea of like, what if like characters didn't die, but instead other things happened to them? This is still sort of here, but a bit different, because this is like very much more like conventional. And so this is like one part of it, and you have to think about, okay, how are you dealing with characters getting hurt during battle? How are you dealing with characters dying during battle? How are you dealing with like a whole party dying during a battle? Like, what consequences come from that? And like, you could obviously just say, oh, well, let's just like, well, the party wipes and you reload a save and you start again. And that's a perfectly valid way of doing things, like, because, well, almost every game does this. But for me, because I'm at this very fundamental stage of this entire project, I wanted to really make sure that, and like, I guess in a way you can look at it twofolds. My personal explanation for this is I want to make sure that like the way I implement these things like is done with like a deliberate like decision making and thought process behind it, so that even though I might end up in this state that like every other game is in, I do that because doing it that way facilitates what I want to do with the game in general. You could also just say, well, the reason I'm thinking so long about all of this is because I'm scared to like put anything down, because again, the moment you put something down, the moment you write something in code, the moment you like build out a system and then start out building a game, is also the moment where you like close down the possibility space of like what this thing can be, right? Because at this point the system exists, and changing that system is always much harder than making a new one, because changing a system also means changing everything else that's attached to it, usually at least. So there's also like a slightly a bit of like me hesitating because of that. And the next part is obviously, and like, well, it's a general problem of this as well, is that that a game or like projects like these, and it's a common problem in any kind of like creative things, you see this a lot or hear this a lot, that obviously the more like vague and nebulous your idea is, the cooler it seems, because it doesn't exist yet. Like, you only have like weird like fragments of scenes and moments and things where you think, oh, this could be funny, or this is really cool and sounds exciting and is great, and you can like idolize a game in such a way, but it's not real because you haven't really made it. And so like in this nebulous state, because it can be it can basically be anything you want it to be, and it's very easy to just think it up and imagine it and think it's cool. Then going into the process of trying to bring it into reality is always scary, because sooner or later you realize, wait a second, this idea isn't as cool in reality as I thought it would be, or this is way too large and complex for me to pull off actually, or I don't know, like I'm not capable of doing it in the way I would like it to do, or like would like it to be. So like basically my abilities are not like at the level where I could actually pull it off. So and these are all moments where you might realize like your own limitations in some way or another, and at the same time it is in these moments where like your vision of something collides with reality, where like the actual like interesting like creative process comes. But because this is like where you start then thinking about where you're confronted with problems that you have to solve. So it's like a cool state to be in some way or another, but it's also, there's a big risk of thinking yourself and imagining yourself into oblivion. So it's a bit of a bit of a weird state where I think maybe I could potentially be a bit faster in the way I'm like working. For example, like this whole thing about like thinking about the entire item system. I built the item system, like the inventory and how you basically build the inventory and how characters then during a battle or like outside of battle are going to pull items out of that inventory. I built this all yesterday, in the morning, basically for over like 2 to 3 hours. But the process for me to like sit down and build the system took 2 days. Mostly because I wasn't sure how I wanted this all to look like. And I was then not really, and when I'm not sure how I wanted this to look like, sure, I could just sit down and like hack something together. But when I then realized, wait a second, this doesn't really fit what I want this to be at the end, I would then again have to go back and redo it. And also there's then the other part of like, if I'm already like this in a way, at least attempting to be meticulous, I'm like, this is like one of these things where like if I'm already that meticulous, kind of like self-aggrandizing in some way, because like I don't know if I'm meticulous in this, like it might be just like normal or like even less meticulous. But if I'm already trying to go into that detail, like trying to think about, okay, how do I want the main like battle, like the sequence of like moves to work, how do I want like defense to like defensive system to act, how do I want to deal damage, how do I want like damage to be handled, like what are like the separate elements of these things, and then going in there and just like doing, I don't know, like whatever, here you have a backpack and you can pull stuff out of it and you have a health potion or whatever, is would be a bit of a weird move if like if instead you could just like sit down and think about like what the purpose of an inventory and like items in like a dungeon crawl or like a larger RPG system could be, and like what you want this to look like. And I had several ideas about that. So the December version of this stuff that I built had character specific inventories where each character had basically access to like a different, or like it was planned for each character to have like access to different items that were kind of like reflecting the character as well. And in a way, this was what I wanted to pull from was the Forged in the Dark series of tabletop games, where each character playbook has like there's a set of like shared like items that each character playbook could pick from, whatever, like a set of like climbing gear or whatever. But each playbook also had playbook specific items they could use, and they could like basically in quotes put in their inventory. The other part that Forge in the Dark has is like a system where you do not really have an inventory, you have load. So when you start like a session, or like start what is it? You can call it a heist or something in like in Blades in the Dark. I don't even know what it's called in Blades in the Dark. Anyway, if you do a thing where you like go somewhere and steal something or want to kill someone or something else, you do not go in there with like a full inventory, or like an inventory where you exactly know, okay, I have like 3 potions and like a set of rope or whatever. Instead, at the beginning of this whole process, each player picks a load for their character, and this load, like it's light, medium, or heavy, and these loads in Forge in the Dark kind of like define how much, in quotes, space in your inventory you have. And during the mission, you can then, at points, or like can then say, I'm going to spend 2 points of load to have armor so that I can avoid getting harmed by like after a failed roll or as a consequence of an action. So like until you declare the item, the inventory is very abstract. and I kind of wanted to have that in that, or like had the idea of like using it in some way in that December prototype. Another like way of thinking about this is like, you know, listening to friends at the table, like in their current season they're playing a game, I think it's called Fabula Ultima or something, which has a like system, from what I can tell from listening to it, I never played it, called inventory points, where again the inventory is like an abstracted resource that then like of points that you can spend during like play to declare items. So you can then say, oh, I'm spending an inventory points to have rope in my inventory. And I was thinking about like doing something like that, because the other part is also, and here you can see how like everything is sort of like connected. One reason why I kind of was thinking about doing a system like inventory points, or like a fairly abstracted out inventory, is because I'm thinking about then further down the line of like, okay, do I want to have like a money economy in the game world this game is supposed to then be played in? Because again, if you take Final Fantasy, that like the inventory and the entire items is fairly simple. You go into a shop and you buy 20 potions or whatever, and you pay whatever, how many gold it takes. If you however, if you were to say, what if this is a world where like a market economy doesn't exist, and gold in that sense, or like money in that sense, doesn't exist? How would you then do something like this? And basically creating something where you like, if you're doing this kind of like thing the characters are doing, you have like an allotment of things that you basically can take with you for these expeditions, in some way or another. That's like the other part of like why I've been thinking about it, because then it's like the question: do I want to have shops in there, or do I want to have something else, or do I want to have this system but also shops? How do I want to do this? So like the first question is then, okay, how do I want to do this? And the next question then is then, at which point does the abstract system of inventory points in this sense suddenly become concrete? Because this is also important if you want to think about exploration. Because if you have a very abstracted out inventory set, like let's imagine you're playing like a dungeon crawler, or imagine this as a dungeon crawler, and you go down into the dungeon and you know, okay, I have like 20 inventory points worth of stuff in my backpack, but I do not have to define what kind of stuff I have in my backpack. That means you're like pretty flexible in terms of like how you can react towards like what the dungeon throws at you. If, I don't know, you run into like a floor that has a lot of poison enemies, you can't just say, oh yeah, I'm spending like my inventory points on antidotes or whatever. And that takes a little, again, it offers the flexibility and offers in that sense also the ability to like react towards what the challenge, like, or what the environment confronts you with, or the game confronts you with. However, it takes away this the preparatory step of it all, and the insecurity of, have I made the right decisions with what I've picked for this sequence that I'm now like trying to do. And it's both of these things have valid like use cases, or like valid, like you can make a valid argument for both in some way or another. But as I was thinking about this all, because my first thought was like, oh, I'll just do like the abstract inventory, because I kind of like the idea of like it being flexible, of like, oh, I really need this item, and look, I have inventory points, so I can use that. But as I thought about this more, I kind of like flipped around on a lot of stuff in terms of like exploration in general, like how, and also difficulty in some way there, in that I feel like to really kind of the way I'm setting all of this up, this needs to be like exploration and pushing forward into like hostile areas, so to speak, should feel there should be a degree of tension there. There should be to a degree like the players should ask themselves, okay, is it wise of me to continue on, or is it like, would it better for me to return to town or return to a checkpoint and restock and try again? And again, these are like both valid reasons. The other reason why I've like maybe thought like kind of like moved away from inventory points is it creates this risk of abstracting out the elixir you don't want to use, or like similarly to like how often, or like at least how I very often play JRPG, or like used to play them, was I will never use magic because MP is very hard to recover usually in these games, and usually very important during boss fights, so I would never use it outside of these situations, which made it like, I don't know, like a third to half of your party sort of useless because they couldn't do anything in battle. And you risk with this abstracted out inventory system, you kind of like risk running into this where like people will sit on their inventory points and never use them because they are afraid of running out of them in a situation where like they think, oh, I really should have like if I only hadn't spent 5 inventory points on like 5 antidotes, when now I need, I don't know, like a jar of water for something. Who knows? I have so much better inventory names, like for like a canister of worm gas. But you, and then it's more like it might be better to kind of force players to make these decisions earlier, so that they then know, okay, this is what I have to deal with. This is what I'm taking with me, and if it doesn't work, oh well. Instead of like being like staying in this weird nebulous space where like you like could always wonder if like maybe if you'd done something slightly different it would have gone better or whatever, and like trying to force decisions basically much earlier, and then having them deal with these decisions instead of like giving them a reason to like be confused and like not use the resources that they have or whatever. So that's like one of the big things. And then I decided that, oh yeah, I really want this. The thoughts that I had here is like, for example, how both Dragon's Dogma games kind of like make leaving town feel like you're like leaving town like a conscious decision. Like, okay, I have to like do this, traverse this part of the map. This is like, it takes roughly this long. I might run into like a certain set of encounters. I should make sure that I have like a specific set of items with me or a specific set of stuff with me that I don't run into any problems. So like that you kind of have to be prepared, or like prepare yourself for what you're about to do. So again, like sort of like preparing for an expedition, like you're making decisions like as best as you can for like what you expect to run into, and then you do the expedition and hope you made the right decisions, and if something goes wrong, you just like try to improvise as best as you can, or you return home. Kind of like to exist in this space. And this then also has then to deal with how do you deal with characters getting hurt and characters dying and failure states in this entire space, because again, it should be about asking yourself, how much do I want to risk going further, and how much is it safer to return home, even though I know that, I don't know, like I would have to like redo like the first third, or like this entire thing that I've just like spent, I don't know, an hour on again. But maybe because I now know better what to expect, I can get through it with like less use of resources and stuff like that. And which also then made me think about my favorite game in that regard, like in some way or another, like dungeon encounters. Well, like one thing I think dungeon encounters does, again, it does a lot of stuff that I like, but like one thing that I really like is how it plays with this. Ooh, should I return home, or should I keep pressing onward? And because it's in this space of like weird insecurity where like hubris happens, and hubris is the best thing that can happen. Like if you build a JRPG or like something you kind of like want to motivate, because then you can like, then this is like the place where you can then like both reward and punish players for having it. And I think it's important to have it to both, and then to create something where you're both rewarded for thinking, oh, I probably shouldn't be doing this, but I think I can handle it. And then you can handle it, and it feels cool. And at the same time, having these moments where I think, oh, sure, I can handle this thing, and then get murdered. And have to start over again, or like have to rescue your party that is now like scattered across the dungeon, or has been like sent to hell by a black hole, or turned to stone, or like turned into hamsters, or whatever else. But for these moments to land, especially for these moments where the game punches you in the face and tells you like, no, you shouldn't have done that. For these moments to land, you have to make sure that like this decision to press on, to risk this, comes from the player, and not from the game just showing up and saying, oh, by the way, you're dead now, which on occasions is also fun, but again, you have to like find a balance. Like another good example, also because I just recently played it, one of my favorite, or like probably like the favorite like rodent that fucks up your day enemies that I know of is in Final Fantasy V. It's called the Skull Eater. It's a squirrel that just kills you. And it only exists in like one cave that you really don't have to enter. And usually like when you enter that cave, it's like some side path in the first act. It has like very low level, completely harmless squirrels in there, and you think, oh well, that's okay. And then you run into this enemy, and at least from my experience, it takes a little bit before it actually does something. And this is in general something that Final Fantasy V does really well with its like asshole enemies, in that they sort of look like a less dangerous version of themselves. Usually show up alone, and you kind of know when you're in trouble the moment you attack them, because usually your attacks either miss or do very little damage. Or you think, oh, wait a second, I kind of like dealt like 6,000 damage to it in like one turn. Why is this thing still alive? And then it starts murdering your party, and you realize, oh, wait a second, maybe I shouldn't have done this. But at the same time, you do something like dungeon encounters where you run into like an enemy and immediately see, wait a second, why does this thing have 20 million HP? Which is a different form of like showing players you're about to make a mistake. You still have maybe a chance to run away, and you should do that. And when they then continue on, they don't really have like I feel like then being punched in the face usually feels, as like a player who has done this or like has experienced this, usually feels nicer and more like you're in on the joke with the developer than like someone just like having fun at your expense. It's like a very like dangerous place to be in. But yeah, having something where like basically this whole process is possible, and it is something that I want to be possible, because one reason why I want to build the system and want to like make games in this is because I do want to like. I personally see that there's so much potential for like just to have fun with enemy designs and enemy encounters and moments of like weird violent slapstick that I want to explore in this, aside from the others parts that interest me about like JRPG battle design, which is as like a way of staging and characterization and like narrative drama in a way, and like that you can like do in a very abstract fashion that sort of interests me, and like how you can sort of like with like the way things are phrased in a menu can shape the world and like the rules of the world in some way. But with this comes also the idea of like, oh yeah, and then there's like someone who just like kills you. But it's not like on the main path or something, but like it's very clearly telegraphed, and if you keep going and like keep pushing on, like you can do that. It's fine, but like be wary. And again, trying to play in that, I have such good ideas for like evil joke enemies. It'll be incredible. But again, trying to build them in general in such a way that, oh yeah, and you can, if you know how everything works, you can kind of like exploit it and like trivialize them, because that's again the other side of it all. So this is all like the big problem I was in, and character death is obviously a big thing because it's hard to do in a way, from like at least for me, where I often feel like where it like striking the balance between it being impactful and consequential and trivializing it. And what's most important for me is to create something where players are more interested with continuing on from in quotes failing, instead of like trying to do it better. Like another example would be like, this is like again something, a different idea for like a different project, but like another one of my ideas was like something for like a turn-based strategy game. And like one thing that like deeply annoys me about like a lot of turn-based strategy games are these moments where you're like, where you want to attack an enemy and then you just miss. And usually the just missing is incredibly boring in terms of consequences, because all that happens is that, oh well, that character now is dead. And for me that was never really, or like very rarely felt like in a way for me to like accept. So I tended to reload the save and try again until like the hit chance worked out in such a way that I won. So in a way this is like similar here, that okay, if you like if your character is dying or is dead, there should be something where like it's not, well, the players then don't end up saying, oh well, I just reload the save and try again, or I stop playing, and instead just say, okay, I can continue on, but there are consequences to like continuing on. So like what I ended up like right now is like a concept is that it will be very hard to revive characters during battle. It's kind of like a similar thing is, and that's again going on a tangent again, but there's like an interesting difference between like Final Fantasy games and Dragon Quest games, and that usually in Final Fantasy games it's somewhat easy to revive a character in battle, whereas in Dragon Quest games it's almost impossible, or like it's very, very hard. You rarely get like a lot of revival items, and the first revival spell you get only has a 50% chance of working. You get usually at higher levels, you get like one that works, but that's not something you will have access to a lot of the time. But what Dragon Quest, for example, has is that like when you die, you just like you get revived at like the last place you saved at, and lose half your money, and then you can get going again. Whereas in like Final Fantasy, you have like your game over and you have to reload your save, and everything is kind of like, okay, you kind of like restart again, and there's no continuation between like you failing at a battle and you going again. And I kind of like the idea of like there being a continuation of like, yeah, sure, you like lost this battle and like the party wiped and you sort of got reset to like the last town you rested at, but the things you did in that time left like traces on the characters. So like I have this idea of, okay, you like if a character dies during battle, first of all, they can still do things. They cannot act like dies in quotes because technically they're not dead because they can still do things. They will lose access to like the attack items and like spells they have, and instead the only thing they can do is help other characters. And helping is like something I think I explained at least a little bit last week. Is like something where one character can basically boost the stats of a different character in some way, and there's like there are plans for like adding to this like an idea of like these characters forming relationships in some way or another, and other things. And what I also want to build is something where like when a character is like in this 0 HP state and they help another character, that help move is working slightly different. There's like different elements to it. Something I did today was like build it in such a way that several characters can help one character. So for example, if like all but one character of your party is dead, their stats get boosted tremendously because every other character is basically, or like you could have every other character help that one character. So they get much stronger, which is, again, kind of like creates something where like, as you get closer to the end of a battle, just because only one character is left alive, you might still have a chance of pulling through, which I think, again, creates a potential for like, if I build the rest well enough, creates this potential of like you kind of like pulling through like a moment where like you were almost dead, which then again creates a much higher like chance of players then saying, oh no, this was kind of a cool moment, I kind of want to keep playing on, instead of like, oh, now like almost my entire party is dead, I have to reload the save. So what happens is like characters at 0 HP, and like at the end of the battle the characters get like brought back up to full health. But they will carry, like, they will get a status effect. Like a status effect that you can only remove when you rest in a town. And these status effects are kind of like more like severe in a way, and this is like, again, this goes back to like when I was thinking about items, because then I was thinking, okay, what kind of items do I want? And then I was thinking about, okay, what purpose do status effects have, for example? Which then led me to the thought of like, oh yeah, status effects only exist to annoy the players. If you think about it in like a random encounter, you rarely apply poison to like a slime or something because the slime gets killed with 2 hits, so it doesn't really matter if you poison them. However, if the slime poisons you, well, you have to go on. And now you're poisoned and like get hurt at every step, and you have to spend resources or time to get rid of that status effect. And again, like going back to Dragon Quest, one interesting thing I learned about Dragon Quest VI was Dragon Quest VI, at least the SNES version, seemed to have 2 different poison status effects. Once a poison status effect like worked during battles where like you lost HP like in battle. The other poison effect did nothing in battles, but was hurting you when you were walking on the overworld map or like walking outside of battle. So it was purely a status effect to annoy you in between battles and to strain your resources in between battles. I found this really interesting. So like think about status effects in a way of like, okay, this is like something that has longer term consequences. There's going to be at least like these specific status effects going to be hard to get rid of. So right now the plan is to have like 2 kind of like 2 types. Ones that stop existing after a battle is over, that, and these usually only get like are those that like are being applied by enemies. And the other ones are those that you get like when a character dies during a battle, that you have to kind of like live with. However, what I want to do, and like I started building these, or like at least the first version of these for like whatever this prototype is gonna be once I get around to like, once I have everything ready and can make it. What I want these status effects to be at the end is like something where I think, oh, I could kind of like twist this around and make useful. For example, one status effect I came up with is called wasteful. And that means that, well, this character is going to use more items. Between like twice to 3 times as many items if they use an item. So like, for example, you have 3 potions and that wasteful character uses like a potion. They may end up using all 3 of them. However, that item's effectiveness or like is gonna be increased because of that status effect. Why? Because they're using too much of it. Another idea I had, or like another status effect, is aimless. Well, like instead of like, well, like an attack or like every move you do is basically has a chance of like it's treated as like a multi-target attack, but like there's a 50% chance only that like it hits like a specific enemy or like character. And that's the like and in a way this is like, this sounds better because hey, my single target attack now could theoretically hit like an entire like group of enemies, but also like maybe you don't want to hit like specific enemies because like, I don't know, they counter attacks or whatever. So there's that part. It's harder to control which enemy you hit because it's random if you hit or not. But also it's something where like, for example, again, let's take the potion. If you are aimless, a potion usually only gets applied to one character. With that status effect, there's a chance that it applies to several. So there's like this part, and like there are other parts where like where you can kind of make them useful via like different means that don't exist quite yet. But my goal is for all of these to be kind of like in a state where like, yeah, they're a bit of a nuisance and annoying, but also if I use the right tools and if I understand that like the way the game works like well enough, I can kind of twist these around and use in my favor, so they're not actually as bad always as they first seem to be. So this is like something that's important for me, that like, again, that these things exist in like a space where you as a player have to ask yourself a question. Is this like too much of a hassle for me to keep going with this? Or would it be better for me to return to town, restock, heal up my characters, get rid of the status effect, and continue on? And the next aspect to this also, and this is like a long-term idea, because for this there needs to be a progression system and like other elements, and also like sort of like a better idea for like what the narrative is going to be. But another system or another way of like getting rid of these status effects I want to put in there is like, you can also like kind of like just like wipe all of these away by taking a quote-unquote wounded level, which means sort of like, oh, you can level up immediately in some way or another, but there's a chance that you just basically increase your level number and your XP like number you need to get to another level, but you do not get any stats. Plus there's like a potential like narrative consequences for like how this character's epilogue will look like or something like that, but that's like very far away because again, no narrative or whatever. And this then also ties into like what I want leveling to look like, because again, going back to, oh, this is an expedition or whatever, right now the idea is like, oh, you cannot level up in dungeons. Aside from like taking like a wounded level or whatever. You cannot level up in dungeons. The only way to level up is it being in town. So again, to like have this moment where like I have kind of like have enough XP and have enough stuff to like gain a level, maybe it's a good idea to just like leave town, maybe pick a new move or like pick something else that like makes my character stronger, and try this again. Or I could just like try to keep going and see if I can make it work with what I have. So that's like And this is something I find interesting for me to basically take all of these elements that happen and that are bound to happen in like a JRPG battle or like in a JRPG dungeon. Take each of these elements, kind of like take them into my metaphorical hands, or like, yeah, and like rotate them around and look at them and ask myself, okay, what purpose does this usually serve? How is this tied to everything else? And how do I want this specific element to look like in what I'm building, so that it fits into the rest of it all and doesn't just exist as like this weird like element that is there just because, well, it's a genre convention that it has to be there, which is in general like a big thing I keep thinking about, like with all of my games, where I rarely do, like, I try not to make my games in such a way that like they have things in there because well, that's how like every game of that genre has it, so like obviously you have to do it as well. I always like want things to have a purpose, and I want to understand what purpose these elements serve, at least like for me in these games. I don't know how other, like, again, this like then the thing of like my own intention as like a designer and like a creative person and like someone who wants to express something in this thing, and like how other people perceive it, which is something you cannot really control aside from like trying to like be upfront about your intentions as much as you can. So yeah, so this is like something I really like about this process. It's a bit it's a bit long. So like for a while I've been thinking about like, oh, what if I just like hack this stuff together in RPG Maker just to get a feel of it all? But at the same, and first of all, I have no idea if you like how much you can like do this kind of stuff that I'm talking about right now just with RPG Maker. But I feel for me to like really building this system from like the ground up with like very clearly stated intentions of what I want this to look like, for me is a good thing to do, because then I know what I can use it for, and like how everything works, and how I can like deploy these specific elements, and how everything else ties into each other. And what's interesting also here is that, and this is something that's like, again, where you can also sometimes see like the unintentional consequences of like building generalized systems. So I built this move spreadsheet, right? Where like, oh, every move is listed in there, and everything is an attack, sort of. Like if you heal someone, that's a health attack. But I built this specifically for like, oh, when you attack someone, or when you use an item, or when you use magic. As I was thinking about the inventory, I was then realizing, wait a second, I can just like add another column in there, or like 2 columns, and just also use the spreadsheet to like build the inventory, where like you can just like create like basically put a statement, or like write a short function that then like looks for specific entries in the spreadsheet and puts them in the inventory with an amount and whatever, which also means that like in theory there could be a way where you could like pick an enemy attack and turn it into an item and use it as an item, which I don't know if that will be in the game, but it's now theoretically possible, which is a cool thing just to exist, and that's again the other part of like having this unified system is like the moment I was able to like pull basically items into the inventory, and the moment they existed in the menu and I could click on them, everything was working. Like the step from, oh, the data is read into the game and it is doing what I wanted to do, was incredibly short. The preparation work was very long, but the moment I had like basically put the data in the spreadsheet and read it in there, and read in there reliably, which was a bit of a struggle, but I got there. Everything was working, and that's kind of like, for me, nice to see, because this is like where I can see, oh, this will be fairly, like, famous last words maybe, fairly easy to like expand upon, and iterate upon, because it's just like a bunch of like entries in a line, and instead of, I don't know, 800 specific enemy attack objects or whatever other horrors I did in the past. And this is great. This is so great in terms of like thinking about the possibilities and how you could like grab the information, different ways of grabbing this information, and like using it for different different means and ends. You can also see, like, this is like one. Can you see that, like, I'm slightly obsessed with the idea of blue mages, because I find the idea incredibly interesting, and other things. I realized two of the characters, like, one of them is a blue mage, the other is kind of like a chemist, if you think about like Final Fantasy V jobs in a way, which is perfect. I'm personally perfectly fine with. Like two of the most broken character classes in video games. Anyway, it's really fun. It's really fun to take these things, think about them, trying to put them in context of like what I've already built, and asking myself, okay, how do I want this all to come together into like a longer sequence, and what do I want the players to ask themselves as they go through this. I'm pretty close now to like having everything in place that you can fight a battle out and go on to another one, which is gonna be a scary thing, because again, so far, even like all of this, the spreadsheet and like how the items work and like what like status effects you can have and all that, this is all still very abstract. Like the real challenge is then like trying to see, okay, how does this feel and how does this work? Like when you have like, I don't know, like 10 encounters in a row. How do I need to tweak these numbers to like get the right, like get the right experience from, like, instead of like, oh cool, now I'm just getting punched, or like an encounter takes 5 minutes. There's like how long they take, how much resources each encounter takes, how and the other part is like how interesting random encounters are, which I think is like a very delicate balance to strike, both in terms of like how long they take, but also in terms of like how to get them to like be like an interesting, or like offer an interesting challenge without being too difficult and cumbersome. Like one big problem I had when I played both Dragon Quest V and what I played of Dragon Quest VI was like encounters were just slogs. Like they took long, and usually they weren't, and that's like a little bit of a problem I have with like the Dragon Quest type of battle system, is they're very samey in terms of like both what enemies do, what you can do, and what's usually the most most efficient way of dealing with problems. There isn't really a lot of like space that gets explored there. They do other things really well in my eyes, like in a way, like they're like really, like, because they're these slogs, and even like boss fights are these slogs, like exploration really feels exhausting, in like sometimes in a really good way, I think, but at the same time, when your first reaction when you get a random encounter is, oh god, not again, but not, oh god, not again, because you're scared that you might die. It's more like, oh god, not again, now I have to like either like try to run away and fail 3 times in a row and get like attacked, or like it just takes 5 minutes to beat like these 3 enemies. Is something I personally didn't felt really like was really interesting and engaging. So like again, figuring out a way to like create these random encounters in such a way, or like encounters in general, they won't be that random, in such a way that people like that they're not bored by it, that each one of them is kind of like has like a sort of like a strategic sequence behind it, or like several that, or like different approaches that you can use, but they're also like breezy while still having kind of like a challenge behind there, like, okay, but if you like kind of like mess up something in there, things might go wrong. You might not again get wiped, but you might get out of it with like in a state that you didn't want to get out of. So like getting this stuff right is gonna be tricky, because I have never done anything like it. So like I think it will take a while, and this is also gonna be just something I have to work on in terms of like trying to rein in my right now very very deep desire of like just like having fun at the expense of the player. Right now, most ideas for encounters I have are those that kind of like just murder you in a funny way, which again is important to have. It is important to have, but you also have to have some where like the players think, oh, nothing can really hit me and nothing can kill me. I'm so powerful and good. Sure, I fight that mouse with 5 million HP. What can go wrong? And then you're in debt for it the rest of your life. So these things are important, and getting them right is important. And getting closer to the state is a bit scary, because again, this is like the moment where you realize, okay, how well does this stuff that you've been imagining in your head actually work in reality? And it, like when the moment hits where it doesn't work, which will happen, how are you gonna react to it, and what are you gonna do to like move on and like move forward with the project that you have in mind? And that's going to be interesting. But yeah, talking for an hour, cool. Anyway, I'm done, I think, for today. Please buy Witcher 7 on Steam. That would be cool. And write positive reviews. That would be even cooler. But buying is also cool, I think. I don't have to buy the game, so I don't know how cool it is, but like I personally think it's a cool game still, even though I've forgotten most of it within like the span of like less than a month. Wow. Anyway, have a nice weekend, I guess. See you around. Like the idea is like kind of like to maybe do these right now like on a weekly basis, like mostly to ramble about like the like what new like menu thing I've picked for like JRPG game that I find interesting. So let's see how it goes, and like how long it takes for me to get bored doing these. Anyway, see you around. Goodbye.